Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we've pulled a truly profound set of sources, all focusing on these ancient maps for human consciousness.
That's right.
Our mission is to take these detailed blueprints for mental development, which, they span everything from ethical discipline to deep meditation and ultimately liberation, and distill them into a clear, immediately actionable understanding for you.
And these are incredibly practical teachings. We're really mapping out the path to achieving mental stillness and freedom with a specific focus on these advanced states of jhana that's deep absorption and the cultivation of the Brahma Viharas.
The boundless heart qualities like compassion and loving kindness or mettā.
Exactly. It's this combination of deep stillness and an open heart.
And what's so remarkable about these texts is that they aren't, they're not vague philosophy. They give you a technical, step-by-step roadmap for moving from just, basic ethical conduct and sense restraint all the way to the complete cessation of suffering, nibbana. It's really the ultimate how-to guide for mental purification.
It is. The systems laid out here demand a certain kind of precision. So our deep dive today is structured to follow that path. First, we'll establish the necessary ethical groundwork.
The foundation.
Then we'll dive into the mechanics and the sequential stages of deep immersion, the jhanas. And finally, we'll connect that stillness with an expansive, limitless heart to achieve that ultimate freedom. The sequence really is the secret.
Okay, let's unpack this. So we start not by, sitting down on a cushion to meditate, but by cleaning house. We start right at the foundation of daily action and ethical choice. Because according to these sources, you just can't build mental clarity on a platform of chaos.
You can't. Impossible.
The path, as is detailed in these sources, is quite clear.
Yeah.
The entire spiritual life has to be, and this is a quote, entirely full and pure. This isn't just about being a good citizen. It's about eliminating the mental static, the defilements that ethical breaches create. So what exactly is this foundational purity, and how does it prevent that inner turmoil later on?
It's the absolute prerequisite for peace. I mean, think about it. If your actions, your deeds, your words, your livelihood are sources of constant regret or worry or guilt, that psychological noise immediately poisons the entire field of concentration. So the texts mandate abandoning unskillful conduct, which is always rooted in what they call the primary poisons: greed, hate, and delusion.
And when we look at the specifics, it's really comprehensive.
Yeah.
We're talking about refraining from acts of killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. These are the basic ethical pillars that prevent harm. But the sources spend a lot of time detailing the necessity of ethical speech.
And this is so critical because speech is where most of our relational and, frankly, our psychological disturbance comes from. The texts divide unskillful speech into 4 distinct categories, and they really get into the nuanced ways we harm ourselves and others with our words.
Okay, let's break those 4 down because they offer some profound insights, especially for our modern social and digital lives. We start with false speech, which is, it's obvious lying.
Simple lying, intentionally misleading people.
Then there's divisive speech.
Divisive speech is just toxic. It's repeating information you heard in one place in another place, specifically to cause a rift or to sow discord.
To turn people against each other.
Yes, it's the intentional spreading of gossip designed to fragment groups. The ethical person, the texts say, is a reconciler, a uniter, not a divider.
Then we have harsh speech. The sources define this as cruel, nasty, and offensive. It's speech that's just born of anger.
Exactly. And it generates an immediate and corresponding ill will in the person you're speaking to, and often, immediate remorse in the speaker. So again, you're creating unpeaceful karma in that very moment. And finally, the 4th one is what the sources call talking nonsense.
Talking nonsense. It sounds almost harmless. But when you look at the definition, it's actually quite powerful. It's untimely, pointless, rambling words that have no value and have nothing to do with the actual spiritual training.
Precisely. And if we think about this in terms of mental energy, every time you engage in endless, pointless chatter, whether it's on a street corner or, in an online comment section, you are actively dissipating your mental reserves.
That's a great way to put it.
The practice of ethical speech is about conservation. It's about making every word useful and timely and kind. And by doing that, you close the door on so much unnecessary mental exhaustion.
I really appreciate you framing it in terms of that immediate cognitive benefit, because the sources do give these serious warnings about future consequences, that immoral conduct leads to rebirth in bad places with some really graphic details.
They do.
But for someone listening, trying to achieve mental stillness today, the insight is, Unethical speech leads directly to self-reproach, to conflict, to scattered attention. It makes deep focus impossible.
Absolutely. The goal is to cultivate what's called the happiness of blamelessness. If you know that your conduct by body, speech, and mind is blameless, you eliminate this massive source of internal anxiety and self-doubt. That resulting inner peace is the essential bedrock for any deep meditation practice to take root.
And if you're constantly reliving moments of cruelty or dishonesty,
you're just refueling the fire of suffering perpetually.
Okay, so speaking of refueling, once we establish this broad ethical foundation, the texts bring us to a practice that's much more minute-to-minute, sense restraint. This feels like the first real step onto the cushion, even if it happens, during your workday.
It is the gatekeeper, moment by moment. It operates at the very point of contact between your inner mind and the outer world. The sources explain sense restraint as a crucial, immediate practice. When you see a sight or hear a sound or smell an odor,
any sensory input,
any of it, the instruction is you must not get caught up in the features and the details.
That is a direct prescription against how the entire modern world is designed to function. I mean, everything from social media feeds to advertising is engineered to make us get caught up in the features and details so that we crave them.
And that's exactly why this practice is so potent and so necessary. The texts warn that if the sense faculties are left unrestrained, these bad, unskillful qualities, specifically covetousness, which is desire and displeasure, aversion, they just become overwhelming.
And they overwhelm the mind because we let our attention just dwell on the gratification or, I guess, the fault in whatever we're sensing.
Yes. So the mechanism of sense restraint is protection. You're protecting the mind from being hijacked by this incessant stream of sensory input.
And that protection, the texts say, leads to an unsullied bliss inside.
It does. And this practice allows you to experience a very profound insight. If you take pleasure in the eye, if you crave and grasp at the sights you see, you are taking pleasure in the very source of suffering, and therefore you are not exempt from suffering.
This goes right back to that core concept of impermanence. The idea is that the six senses, eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind, and their objects, and the consciousness in feeling that arise, all of it is ultimately characterized as suffering because it's all impermanent. It's always changing.
And so the enlightened response is to see all of this with right understanding, to realize this is not mine, I'm not this is not myself. The noble disciple becomes disillusioned with the senses because they see them constantly rising and passing away. And when that disillusionment takes root, desire just fades away. And they're freed from that tyranny of constantly chasing or resisting the next experience.
So this dual practice of an ethical foundation and this moment-to-moment sense restraint, it's all designed to create a calm, focused, regret-free state, which then prepares the mind for deep immersion.
Correct.
And that leads us directly to the internal contaminants, the 5 hindrances. These are described as the final internal roadblocks, the corruptions of the heart that weaken wisdom. And they have to be given up entirely before deep immersion, before jhana is even possible.
That's right. If the field isn't cleared of these 5, the meditative mind is just instantly diverted or clouded or agitated. They are the psychological static that prevents any kind of depth.
Okay, let's detail how the sources instruct us to overcome each one, starting with the first 2, which are basically the internal manifestations of greed and hatred. First, covetousness or sensual desire.
This deep, hungry clinging to sensual experience, it's addressed by systematically recognizing its drawback. The mind has to be cleansed of covetousness, and the texts provide these really powerful similes to break the spell of sensual pleasure.
What are they like?
They liken it to a bone scraped clean of meat or a grass torch carried against the wind, a pit of glowing coals, or even the temporary lure of a snake's head. The pleasure is momentary, the cost is immense, and the danger of injury is guaranteed.
That's a necessary corrective because when desire arises, it feels so vital and compelling. It feels like a life necessity. Those similes are meant to shock the mind out of that deception.
Exactly. And the opposite, ill will or malevolence, the mind that's fixed on hating or harming or fault-finding, that's overcome directly by cultivating sympathy for all living beings. This is really the initial seed of that boundless heart the mettā we'll discuss later, but here it's used almost defensively to counter active hatred.
Okay, so next we address the quality of energy in the mind, the tendency to sink or to slacken, dullness and drowsiness.
This is banished by activating bright perception. The instruction is to meditate while perceiving light, staying mindful and aware. The mind has to be clear and alert, not heavy or sinking. The difference between a dull mind and a bright, concentrated mind is absolute. You can't gain profound insight while you're half asleep.
Makes sense. And its energetic opposite, the jittery, unsettled mind, restlessness and remorse.
This often comes from those unskillful deeds we talked about earlier, or just the agitation inherent in an untrained mind that's bouncing from one thought to the next. The remedy is simple in principle, but difficult in practice. Achieving internal peace, stabilizing the mind right where it is.
And the final hindrance, which really undermines the entire project of spiritual liberation. Doubt.
Doubt is overcome by just going beyond it, by being decisively clear about the path you're on and the skillful qualities you're cultivating. It's the conviction that what you're doing is the right thing to be doing, and that allows the mind to commit fully without that constant nagging distraction.
The power of removing these hindrances is summed up so beautifully using a simile. You asked us to imagine a lake in a mountain glen, transparent and unclouded.
Right. Imagine that lake completely still. It reflects everything perfectly. The hindrances are like, well, restlessness is like the lake being churned by a violent wind. Sensual desire or ill will, that's like the lake being boiled with muddy sludge. And dullness and drowsiness are like the whole surface being covered by weeds and moss.
You can't see anything.
Nothing. But when the mind is freed from these 5 defilements, it becomes perfectly clear, transparent and unclouded. And a person standing on the bank can see everything below the surface. The clams and mussels, the pebbles and gravel, the schools of fish swimming about or staying still. That's the mind. It becomes this perfectly still field of observation, and that readiness signals the start of the next phase.
So once that lake is cleared of the 5 defilements, what's the specific mechanism used to harness that purity, that stillness? This brings us to the Jhana, or absorption, the practical heart of deep mental development. And the promise here is transforming the mind into a tool that is purified, bright, flawless, rid of corruptions, pliable, workable, steady, and imperturbable.
Yes, now we're talking about deep states of concentration, or samadhis. The terms immersion, samadhi, absorption, jhana, and unification, ekaggata, are all sort of overlapping concepts that describe the state of profound, elevated consciousness.
So it's not just regular focus, it's something qualitatively different.
It's a different order of mind. And importantly, the texts make a sharp distinction here. They distinguish sensual pleasure, which is described as filthy, ordinary, and ignoble, from what they call the pleasure of renunciation, the pleasure of seclusion, the pleasure of peace, the pleasure of awakening.
And that's a pleasure that should be cultivated, not feared.
It absolutely should. It's the fuel for the path. It's a refined, clean-burning fuel that leads to clarity, not to more craving.
Okay, so let's get into the detailed map of the 4 absorptions, the 4 jhanas. Can you walk us through the first one?
Of course. So having given up the 5 hindrances, the meditator enters the first absorption. This is characterized by seclusion from sensual pleasures and unskillful qualities, but it still has mental factors. It possesses rapture and bliss born of that seclusion.
Okay, so there's a definite feeling of joy and pleasure.
Very much so. And all the while, the mind is still active in a subtle way. The text says it's placing the mind and keeping it connected. There's a subtle application of thought to hold the object of meditation.
So you're in a blissful state, but you're still gently working to keep the mind there.
That's a good way to put it. Then, as that subtle work fades away, you enter the second absorption.
How is that different?
Well, the placing of the mind and keeping it connected are stilled. They've ceased. And what arises is a different kind of rapture and bliss, one that's born of immersion itself, of pure concentration. The mind has this internal clarity, and it's at one. There's no more of that subtle thinking or application needed.
So the mind becomes self-sustaining in its focus.
Exactly. It's effortless now. From there, you move to the third absorption. This is achieved with the fading away of even that rapture. The intense, almost excited joy of the second jhana subsides.
And what's left?
You meditate with equanimity, mindful and away, and you personally experience a very subtle bliss. The texts say it's the bliss of which the noble ones declare, equanimous and mindful, one meditates in bliss. It's a calmer, more profound sense of well-being.
So the energy level is changing, becoming more and more refined.
Precisely. Which leads to the fourth absorption. This is achieved with the giving up of both pleasure and pain, and the disappearance of all the former happiness and sadness you've ever felt. It is a state completely without pleasure or pain, just pure equanimity and mindfulness, utter stillness.
That's an incredible progression.
Yeah.
But are there pitfalls here? Can you get lost in these states?
Oh, absolutely. The texts are very clear about the risks. There's a warning that if, in the first absorption, your consciousness follows after that rapture and bliss, if you get tied to it, attached to it, the mind is said to be stuck internally.
So you've just traded one form of craving sensual pleasure for a more refined one, the pleasure of meditation.
And you're stuck. The goal is not just to experience these states, but to use the mind shaped by these states for insight. The goal is direct knowledge.
What does that mean, direct knowledge?
It means that the fully immersed mind, this purified, bright, flawless, pliable mind from the fourth jhana, is now a perfect instrument. It can be extended toward the recollection of past lives. The sources are quite specific. They say one can recollect details of past rebirths over many eons. 1, 2, up to 100,000 rebirths, and even the eons of the world contracting and expanding.
That requires an unbelievable level of mental clarity.
It requires a mind that is, and again I'm quoting, purified, bright, flawless, rid of corruptions, pliable, workable, steady, and imperturbable. It's not a party trick. It's a profound insight into the nature of continued existence of samsara.
And there are even more advanced attainments mentioned, right? Going beyond even the physical world.
Yes, there's the potential to transcend even the perception of the physical elements, earth, water, fire, and air, and enter what are called the formless dimensions, the dimension of infinite space, of infinite consciousness, of nothingness, all while still perceiving. These are incredibly subtle states of mind.
Which seems to tell us that this deep meditative stillness isn't even the final goal in itself. It's a tool. Which brings us to cultivating the heart. The sources talk about the necessity of developing positive perceptions that actively cause these unskillful qualities to decline.
Right. This is the other wing of the bird. You need both wisdom and compassion, both stillness and an open heart. This means actively living with a perception full of contentment, full of goodwill, and full of kindness.
As a direct contrast to those negative perceptions, covetousness, ill will, the intent to harm, which cause the unskillful qualities to grow.
It's an active cultivation. You are intentionally inclining the mind toward the positive, toward what is skillful. This leads to what the texts call the limitless heart. A mendicant must live with mindfulness of the body established, yes, but also with a limitless heart.
And how is this practiced? How do you develop this?
One of the key practices explained is using equanimity. So when an agreeable, a disagreeable, or a neutral feeling arises in you, say, conditioned by bodily contact, you have to recognize it. You see it as conditioned, crude, and dependently originated.
You see it for what it is, not some absolute reality.
Exactly, and then you focus on the peaceful and sublime state of equanimity until it stabilizes. The text says this cessation of being jerked around by feelings can be achieved swiftly, as easily as a strong person would extend or contract their arm.
Wow, and the sources are explicit here. Developing the heart's release by equanimity is stated as the escape from desire.
It is the escape. You are no longer a slave to pleasant and unpleasant feelings. You find freedom right in the middle of them.
You've mentioned these formless dimensions, these higher states. Can you briefly list these levels that go beyond even the 4 absorptions? They're called liberations, right?
That's right. They're a sequence of 8 liberations. After the 4 jhanas, you can enter the dimension of infinite space. Then the dimension of infinite consciousness, then the dimension of nothingness, where you are aware only that there is nothing at all.
Incredibly subtle.
Then the dimension of neither perception nor non-perception. And finally, the ultimate state, the 8th liberation, is the cessation of perception and feeling altogether. And this is described as a pleasure that is finer and more sublime than all others.
The complete stopping of all mental activity.
The final piece.
So how does all of this, the ethics, the concentration, the boundless heart, how does it all connect to that ultimate fruit of the practice, which is liberation and the end of suffering?
It all comes back to the core teaching that defines the entire path. Dependent origination, the chain of cause and effect. The sources state it very simply. When ignorance ceases, the entire mass of suffering ceases.
So can you walk us through that chain backward?
Of course. The cessation of rebirth. Well, that leads to the cessation of old age and death, and with it, sorrow, lamentation, pain, sadness, and distress. This entire mass of suffering ceases because you have stopped the process that fuels it. You've stopped the formation of consciousness, of choices, of craving, of grasping, and of continued existence.
That's a pulling the plug.
It's exactly like that, and this understanding provides what the texts call the knowledge and vision of freedom that is independent of any other teacher or any other source. You see it for yourself.
And this is the moment of Nibbana, the end of all the defilements.
Yes. The moment of ultimate freedom is when the mind, perfectly immersed in samadhi, is extended toward the knowledge of the ending of defilement.
What's the realization in that moment?
The realization is a true understanding of suffering, of its origin, of its cessation, and of the practice that leads to its cessation. You see it clearly concerning not just suffering in general, but all the specific defilements. The defilement of sensuality, the defilement of the desire to be reborn, the defilement of ignorance.
And the liberated state is then characterized by this definitive understanding. Rebirth is ended. The spiritual journey has been completed. What had to be done has been done. There is nothing further for this place.
That's the declaration of freedom. And that freedom, that liberation, comes by not grasping. It's achieved after truly understanding the origin, the disappearance, the gratification, the drawback, and the escape from the 6 fields of contact, the senses.
So the practice of Jhana and the Brahmaviharas, they create the conditions for that final non-grasping.
Exactly. They ensure that when desire fades away, you are freed. And when you are freed, you know you're free. There's no doubt left.
There's a final, very powerful comparison in the sources to describe this.
Yes. The suffering that is over and done with for the noble disciple who has found this freedom is tiny. It's compared to, say, 7 mustard seeds. And the massive amount of suffering that has been worn away and eroded through countless past lives, that is compared to the entire Himalayan mountain range.
What's left is almost nothing compared to what has been overcome.
Almost nothing.
That's an incredible journey. We've moved from the very foundational level of morality and sense restraint through the distinct, refined stages of jhana, and then into the boundless development of these heart qualities, all leading to the complete cessation of suffering.
It's a complete path. Yeah. Every step is necessary, and every step builds on the last.
So, as we close out, do you have a final provocative thought for our listener? Something for them to mull over?
I do. The path requires sustained vigor. It's not a casual pursuit. The sources state that for a faithful disciple who is practicing to fathom the teacher's instructions, they should think this: gladly let only skin, sinews, and bones remain. Let the flesh and blood waste away in my body. I will not relax my energy until I have achieved what is possible by human strength, energy, and vigor.
That's an intense level of determination.
It is. It speaks to what's at stake. It's not a hobby. It's the pursuit of ultimate freedom.
Thank you. That's a powerful place to end. And for you, our listener, we encourage you to reflect on which aspect of this path, whether it's purifying your ethical behavior, developing that moment-to-moment sense restraint, or pursuing that deep meditative stillness, feels most compelling, most necessary for your own next step in this deep dive into knowledge.